Hey, friends, this is the Real Agents of Change podcast, where we talk to nonprofits, those they have supported, those who support them, find out a little bit about the nonprofit and the $550,000 question, which is what would you do with that kind of money? So, Julie, tell our viewers a little bit about you and your cause, and we're going to find out what you do with the $500,000. Go for it.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I have been counseling for a very long time. And one thing that I've discovered is that I have a strong desire to maximize what I can offer. I don't have a lot of resources beyond myself, but I can maximize that. And one way that I did that several years ago was I took a break from counseling and I started lobbying on the state level for about 10 years regarding issues that had crossed my threshold over and over again. And I thought, okay, rather than tackling this one at a time, let's deal with the issues at hand. So I lobbied, loved it. Fast forward, went back into private practice until I started having the same pattern. The same themes kept crossing my threshold. This time it was trauma and people trying to process it, people trying to deal with it. So I committed to 2 years of commuting to Washington, DC, and I got my specialty in traumatology, in training for trauma, in particular field work, so that I can go to a place where a crisis has happened or is in the throes of happening. And that is when I set my course. And now I have affiliated with a couple of organizations. I went to Romania and worked with an organization that serves the Romani people, also known as Gypsies. It's not a pejorative term. They actually don't mind that. And through the course of working with the Gypsies, we realized that this staff was asking us more and more questions. And next thing you know, by the end of our visit, we turned toward working with the staff and training the staff. Similar thing happened when we went to Puerto Rico, Yabucoa. There was a group of workers there to rebuild the community that had just been hit by a hurricane, which was subsequently hit by a second hurricane. And those workers were shot. All their work had been undone. A lot of them were young people. They were getting fried. Some were acting out, making bad choices. Moved in, worked with them on what we discovered was secondary trauma, because they were there rebuilding the houses while the family was sobbing about their loss, about what had happened, about their pain. Those people weren't equipped to work with that. So again, ended up working with the staff as a way to leave behind something that could then be exponentially improved on for the people. I also recently went to Lesbos Island in Greece, which is the Ellis Island of Western Europe for the Eastern or Middle Eastern refugees, just like Ellis Island was here for the refugees earlier days. And one thing that we realized there was, while we were hands-on with the refugees, and boy, were their needs there. Talk about a need for resources. There's so many stories I could tell you about that. But I also worked in a community center across the street. And that's where we started, a lot of times on a nonverbal level, using techniques that we learned in trauma training, et cetera, to communicate with these people and help them process their trauma. The staff started tapping us on the shoulder. Can I just talk to you? Can we go out for coffee? Can we have a glass of wine? So they can pour their hearts out. And then also, can you help us learn even the basics of what you do so that we can replicate that? So now I'm in a position where that's what I am about. I've affiliated with Communitas, which is the missions organization. And I am realizing that with this war in Ukraine, churches, I really have a heart for pastors and missionaries, because a lot of those cultures still go to churches as their first resort. They go to their church for help. They go to their pastor, their priest. So the pastors take them in. Literally, their sanctuaries are turning into sanctuary states for these people. And they can minister to them and they can meet their spiritual needs, but they don't know how to deal with the horrific traumas that they either saw in the country they came from or that they experienced at the hands of the coyotes trying to get to safety. And so what I want to do is go in and minister to the pastors through bringing in spiritual directors and teams, et cetera, so that I can multiply and duplicate myself and leave them with further assistance. So $550,000. Here's what I would do with that. I want to create systems. I want to be able to bring in teams of professionals with me. Now, by a team, I'm talking 4 to 6 people, not massive amounts, but very carefully selected people, a curated team to meet a variety of needs. Because therapists, social workers, spiritual directors, et cetera, tend to make their living on an appointment by appointment basis. If I ask them to come over and help me for 2 weeks, they've lost half a month's pay. So I want to be able to fly them over, offer them a stipend for what they're doing. They can get an idea of what these people are going through by helping hands-on. They can certainly assist with the training because I have plenty of resources through the training facility in DC and some of their other international training sites. And then the key is when they leave, they go back to the United States, but they continue to counsel these people online. So there's a continuity of care. And it may be on a sliding scale so that I'm not, draining funds left and right, paying for full price therapy. It would have to be a person who has to have a heart for what the population they're dealing with. But most therapists at this point have a sliding scale anyway. So when I deploy, for example, to a place in the United States that's had a shooting or a tornado or something like that, then I come in and do the field work in the moment, but then hand them off to local therapists to do the long term, because crises has a ripple effect and everybody wants to help in the initial. And then people disappear, but the victims are still dealing with it, right? Well, who do I refer them to in a refugee camp? So instead, what I want to do is bring the help to them. They establish the therapeutic rapport and then go back and work online with them and continue the care. And there are people, we think of refugees as being poor and needy, but there are also, war has no limits as far as who it impacts. So there's people there with laptops, there's people there with cell phones, there's people there with all kinds of resources. And the center itself often provides Wi-Fi, the base provides Wi-Fi, or various entities, philanthropists, et cetera, provide the Wi-Fi. And so it's not like they wouldn't have access to being able to meet with somebody. So that's kind of my initial thought.
I love what we are doing, the Real Agents of Change, because we get to meet people like you. We all know that there are churches and there are veteran groups and there are homeless shelters and there are children's organizations and all these wonderful 1.3 million nonprofits in this country. And, to be able to meet people like you who are doing such work in the trenches, as I say, we like to say our mission is to fund your mission. Our purpose is to fund your purpose, because we're not out in the trenches like you are making that difference. We just want to help you get funded. So for those of you who are watching, why do we say $550,000? Well, as you can see the book behind me and the one that I have in my hand, real estate is hot, fundraising is not. And $550,000 is the average donation from a piece of real estate. And that's why we want to teach you that you can help Julie's cause through a gift of real estate from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world in some cases, any size of any type. So Julie, what's a last thought or two that you would like our viewers to know about how this money would really help you? Would you like to share one of those heart-wrenching stories you were sharing with me last week about some actual people who were in your therapy?
Most definitely. There is an American couple who went to Ukraine 8 years ago and opened one of the first, if not the first, residential care facility for developmentally disabled young men. The reason it's young men is they go into the institutions because and the younger ones tend to be able to be adopted. But once we hit teenage boy age, nobody is less likely anyway, to adopt them. So they bring them into this residential setting and raise them, treat them, get their services met, often realize that they don't have to be nonverbal. They don't have to be non-ambulatory. They just need love and attention. So this couple has been doing this in Ukraine. Well, along comes the war. And they're sitting there in their town, and little by little, more and more missiles are coming overhead. And they're really praying about wisdom as to when to evacuate, because they're not going to be able to do it quickly. They've got non-ambulatory people, they've got wheelchairs, they've got, I think their final count when they finally evacuated was 37 people. And they have their own family, they had a handful of staff, and they finally, when a bomb hit close enough that it rattled their rafters, that was the go sign. And they packed them up, and the stories they have of just getting to Germany. They went to Germany because there was a church there who had been somewhat supportive of them. It took them, once they hit the border, 26 hours of staying in the car, no food, no toilet facilities, with all these young men just to cross the border. But you don't dare get out of line or someone else takes your spot. They get to this church, and they have been living there now for the last month to 6 weeks in a church basement with all these young men and their own family. Some of their staff has left, and they are struggling now to care for them without the amenities that they had in their facility in Ukraine. And they're getting fried and exhausted, and are having to make tough choices regarding the safety of their own children. And their staff is little by little wanting to seek, their own families and make sure they're okay. So my goal, the most pressing thing I would like to do is go over there and triage the situation myself. I am working with them on a counseling basis online, triage the situation, see what type of help they need, and put together a team to bring over and help them. And then from there, you start everything, everything's connected. So you start working with them, and next thing you know, you find out another thing and another thing. This group reached out to me based on my work in Greece. So once people see your heart, once people see your intention and your results, that you can put action behind your words. It's wonderful that volunteer groups go over, but they go over for a limited amount of time. They run, they do some daycare for kids. They fold some bandages. They do, little tasks like that. And that's very, very helpful. But then they leave, and the group is just waiting for the next round of volunteers to come. Continuity of care is huge for them. And that's what I want to provide, but that takes money.
Friends, we came, personally, no makeup, hair up, outside, hot and sweaty, because we want to just be vulnerable with you. We just want you to hear the story. No pretense, no fancy suit, no uppity talk. Just here's what Julie needs. Here are the people that need her help. And it may not be your real estate. It may be someone you know. It may be someone you don't even know, but because you clicked share on this video, somebody somewhere heard her message. And maybe they donate a $200,000 piece of land, or maybe they donate a $20 million strip mall. We don't know. They come from everywhere, of every size. And if you would be so kind as to share this podcast, she just might be able to save lives all over the world. Julie, thank you so much for being one of the soldiers, one of the warriors, one of the people out making a difference, because that is a real agent of change. Any last words?
Just that I don't want to underestimate the assistance of prayer as well. There's a lot of social organizations that go over to Europe, but the pastors, the missionaries, a lot of those people that have been working forever, long before the war, don't avail themselves of those resources. And that's my target. And so in addition to any generosity that you can offer, prayer is also very welcome. And I appreciate it very much. And you as well, Cami.
Well, thank you for reminding us of that. As we know, the Real Agents of Change, 28% of all money that's donated in this country actually is donated for religious aspects. So there are a lot of people out there who are faith-based, and they will hear your prayer, looking for their prayers. Everybody, if you want to learn how you can donate real estate to Julie, feel free to reach out to me or to her. Go to the RAOC, RAOC.com. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Real Agents of Change podcast. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.